Good evening, students. Can you all hear me? Yes, can you hear me? Okay. So, in the previous class, we were talking about algae, right? We were talking about general characteristics of algae, correct? Yeah. So, now today we'll talk about the continuation of the general characteristics. So, what did we discuss initially about the general characteristics?
We spoke about the thallus.
Yeah. So, we talked about how algae generally occur. They are photosynthetic, autotrophic, chlorophyll bearing, right? Autotrophic, chlorophyll bearing, and eukaryotic organisms. And then occurrence, generally it occurs both in marine as well as freshwater habitats, and it can also occur in terrestrial habitats, mainly moist stone, moist rocks, wood, right? So they can be aquatic, freshwater or marine, or they can be terrestrial as well. Okay. So when we say terrestrial, it's mostly associated with water. Okay. Moist rocks, stone, all of that. Yeah. And then we were talking about how the thallus it is, right? It is not properly differentiated. It's a thalloid plant body. Thalloid meaning not properly differentiated, and no vasculature, correct? No vascular tissues. And then we were talking about how the thallus organization is. So this is one quite major topic under algae, which is thallus organization, where it's quite vast, but we will talk about it in simple terms. Okay, we will not include a lot of thala in this. Okay, so we'll talk only about the simple forms, or how in different thallus forms algae will appear. So the first possibility is single celled or unicellular. Okay, so we do know unicellular algae, right? Like, can you give me an example for a unicellular alga? Let me write unicellular and motile. Example, Chlamydomonas. So this is quite important. Unicellular and motile alga, Chlamydomonas, and it looks something like this. So one single cell with two flagellae. This is Chlamydomonas, unicellular motile. Then we have unicellular non-motile. Example, chlorella. So actively moving is when the algae have flagella in it. Now in this case flagella are not present in case of chlorella. So unicellular algae non-motile. So motile example Chlamydomonas, non-motile chlorella. And then we have colonial forms. What is colonial? It's a colony, meaning individual cells that will associate together to form a colony. Okay, so that is volvox example. Now a diagram of volvox is given in your textbook. You can refer to page 25. So there you can see volvox, where it's actual cells like this. Inside there will be many cells, and individual cells are connected to each other by means of gelatinous strands. Okay, so this is wallwork. So it's kind of a circular colony with individual cells that are connected together by gelatinous strands. Okay, so this is colonial thallus. And then we have filamentous thallus, example Spirogyra. So we have actual multicellular thallus, okay, Spirogyra. So each individual cell, so it will form a chain of cells. So what happens, the algae looks like long thread-like structures that are tangled with each other. So filamentous thread-like structures. And finally we have large, massive plant bodies like kelps. Okay, so those will be divided into root like, stem like, leaf like structures. Those are massive seaweeds which you usually find in oceans. Okay, so this is about thallus organization in algae. Now moving to the next topic. Now I said algae are photosynthetic. So what kind of pigments will algae have? Photosynthetic pigments will be chlorophyll A. Okay, it's generally chlorophyll A, B, and like that. Then there will be carotenes and xanthophyll. Okay, so the photosynthetic pigment is chlorophyll. And then talking about different pigments of algae, now we do not just have chlorophyll, the green pigment. We also have other colors of algae like brown algae and red algae, which we will study. But the color mainly depends upon the concentration of the pigment that we're talking about. Okay, now algae generally we call them green in color because of the abundance of the pigment chlorophyll A. But the different colors of algae that you see, that is because of some extra pigment that is present in excess amount. So we get the characteristic color of algae. So that when we talk about each class of algae, we'll talk about it in detail. So just for now, remember pigments of algae will be this: chlorophyll A, B, carotenes and xanthophyll. It will have chloroplasts in it. Okay, so within the chloroplast, the pigment will be present. And then talking about vegetative reproduction. Now vegetative reproduction takes place by a process called fragmentation. So just like how we saw in case of fungi, fragmentation is seen in algae as well. So mostly filamentous thalli will reproduce vegetatively by fragmentation, and sometimes in unicellular forms, cell division can also take place. So for now fragmentation is enough, vegetative reproduction. Then asexual reproduction. Now asexual reproduction is by the formation of asexual spores, mainly in this case zoospores. Okay, so asexual spores like zoospores, which are motile, and sometimes aplanospores can also be found, which are non-motile, but majorly asexual reproduction is by means of zoospores. And then talking about sexual reproduction. Now sexual reproduction can happen by three means. Now this we have already talked about in fungi. Can you tell me, there are three different types by which, or three different types of sexual reproduction based on the morphology of the fusing gametes. What is it called? Based on the morphology of the fusing gametes, there are three different types of sexual reproduction. What are they?
Isogamous,
Yes, very good.
anisogamous, and
Anisogamous and oogamous. So we have
oogamous.
isogamy. Yeah. Number one, isogamy. Now what is isogamy? Similar in morphology, right?
Fusion of gametes dissimilar in size. No,
Yes. So
that
the fusing gametes are similar in size and shape. So when we say similar in size and shape, we also talk about its motility, meaning it can be both motile gametes or non-motile gametes. So in this case, isogamy, the fusing gametes are similar in size and shape, and the gametes can be motile or non-motile. So in case of motile, the example is Eulothrix. Eulothrix is one example of an alga where it is isogamous sexual reproduction, and the gametes are similar in size and shape and they are motile. The other variability is non-motile. Example, Spirogyra. Okay. So isogamous motile gametes will be Eulothrix, non-motile gametes will be Spirogyra. Then anisogamy, dissimilar in shape and size. Okay, so generally it will be flagellated or non-flagellated gametes, that doesn't matter, but they will not be of the same size. So one might be smaller, the other one might be large. Okay, so that is anisogamy, dissimilar. Dissimilar gametes which may be flagellated. Example, Eudorhina. Eudorhina. Okay, so this is example of anisogamy. And number 3, oogamy. Oogamy is when we have a motile male gamete and a non-motile female gamete, otherwise called the egg cell, right? So that is oogamy, motile male gamete and non-motile female gamete. Example, we see this in volvox and fucus. Volvox and fucus. Okay, so this is about sexual reproduction in algae. Is this clear? So we talked about general characteristics, thallus organization, pigments, vegetative, asexual and sexual reproduction. Clear? Okay, so next we'll move on to the next topic, which is different classification or classes of algae. So classification of algae. Now the basis for classification is of types in algae, which we will not worry ourselves with. So there are many different classes of algae, but we only have 3 classes included. Number 1 is class Chlorophyceae. Class Chlorophyceae, commonly called green algae. So the name comes from the characteristic grass green color that it exhibits. Okay, so the basis for classification of algae is generally the type of pigment that we are talking about. Okay, so what gives the algae its characteristic color? The pigment and the kind of storage food material. This is generally on the basis, the basis for which we classify algae. Now, in case of class Chlorophyceae, commonly called green algae, we will talk about first the habitat where we find green algae. They may be freshwater or marine. They can be freshwater or marine, or sometimes they can also exist in terrestrial regions, like I said, moist wood. Okay, moist rocks and stones and wood. Then exist as planktons. What is planktons? Freely floating. Okay, they can exist as planktons, freely floating forms, or they can be attached to a particular substratum as well. So that is one. Then, or they can occur as components of lichens, which means they can be found in association with fungi and they will occur as lichens. Okay, so this is one. Then next is body form of class Chlorophyceae. Body form as in thallus organization. So under class Chlorophyceae we see again unicellular motile. Example, what did I say? Chlamydomonas is one. We can see unicellular motile forms, Chlamydomonas. So this we have already seen in general characteristics of algae. It is just repeating under Chlorophyceae. Okay, unicellular motile, then unicellular non-motile. Example, again the same, Chlorella. Now next is number 3, filamentous. Before that, colonial, that also we have studied the example, volvox. Okay, colonial example, volvox. And number 4, filamentous unbranched. Filamentous unbranched form, example, Spirogyra. So this is just simple chains of cells where we will not see any side branching. Okay, so this is Spirogyra, where within this you will see characteristic spiral shaped chloroplast, hence the name. Okay, so this is Spirogyra filamentous. Then filamentous branched forms, example, Cladophora. Remember Cladophora, this is one more algae where it is again chain of cells, but it shows branching like this. Okay, so the filaments are branched. So this is about the different types of the thallus organization. So again in colonial we can find motile and non-motile forms, but we'll not worry ourselves with that at this stage. Okay, so this is about thallus organization. Is so much clear now under?
No, no, no. All these
Yeah,
examples you've given, all of them are chlorophyceae.
yes, all of them are Chlorophyceae. So what we saw previously, that was an inclusion of
General.
all, yeah, general for algae. This is specifically for Chlorophyceae, only Chlorophyceae members. Okay, so next we'll talk about class Chlorophyceae, the cell structure. Okay, individual cell. Okay, so when we talk about cell structure, first we'll start with the cell wall. Okay, now cell walls of algae are generally cellulosic, where the inner layer is cellulosic and the outer layer is made of pectose. So in the chapter which is cell, the unit of life, you will see that algal cell wall is made of cellulose, galactins and mannins. Those are also present. But in this case, we are talking specifically about the inner layer and outer layer of the cell wall. So that galactins and mannins are present. But along with that, we will talk about the specific layers of the cell wall, where the inner layer of cell wall is cellulosic and outer layer is made of pectose. Okay, pectin.
Other than these two, there are galaxies and manners in all of them.
Yes, they are
In
present.
all of them.
Yes, yes. Galactins and mannins are general, composition of the cell wall in general, but this is specifically inner layer will be cellulosic, but the outer wall will be, it will have a pectin deposition. Next, talking about photosynthetic pigments. So over here, the photosynthetic pigment is chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. Okay, chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B, carotene and xanthophyll, which provides this algae a characteristic grass green color. Okay, so chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B, carotene and xanthophyll together will provide a characteristic grass green color to chlorophyce. Hence we call them green algae. Is this clear? And these photosynthetic pigments are present inside chloroplasts of various shapes. They found inside chloroplasts of various shapes. Now this is a characteristic that you will only see in class chlorophyce. Okay, so what happens is we have chloroplasts exhibiting different shapes. So we have number one, cup shaped chloroplast. So we see cup shaped chloroplast as in Chlamydomonas, and then there is spirally coiled ribbon like chloroplast, which means it is flattened like a ribbon and it is spirally coiled. Example, as the name indicates, Spirogyra is one. And then we can have, disc shaped chloroplast, which we see in case of Cara. And we can have stellate meaning star shaped chloroplast, as in case of Zygnema. Okay, so these are the different shapes of chloroplast. So this is one very characteristic feature that we see only in case of chlorophyce. Okay, chloroplasts present in very interesting shapes. So like this we can have network like chloroplast. Okay, so these are different shapes. Then talking about,
1 minute, teacher.
yeah, take it down. Done. Okay, next we will talk about something called pyrenoids. Now this is a structure that is usually found in close association with the chloroplast. Okay, have you heard of pyrenoids before? So pyrenoids are structures that surround the chloroplast. So like I said, they're found in close association with the chloroplast and their main function is to store starch. Okay, so pyrenoids are structures that surround the chloroplast and they are starch storage structures. Again, pyrenoids are also seen only in case of algae. So over here, this is a plant cell where starch is the reserve food material, correct? But for that purpose, for storage of starch, it has a specialized organ which is called pyrenoid. Okay, so it's a starch storage structure where there is a central protein. Okay, so there is a proteinaceous center surrounded by starch sheets. So how it's present is, if suppose this is a pyrenoid, there will be centrally a protein molecule surrounded by many layers of starch that are laid down. Okay, so a pyrenoid is a starch storage structure where generally there is a central protein surrounded by many starch sheets. Okay, so starch storage structure, that is pyrenoid. Then we do have other storage materials. So general reserve food material, is starch, but other than this, we can also have oil droplets. Okay, oil droplets. Some forms will also show oil droplets. Okay, so this is about reserve food material. This is clear? Okay, next we'll talk about reproduction. Now, reproduction again, first is vegetative reproduction, which is by means of what we just saw, fragmentation. So, for reproduction, the first one is vegetative type, which is by fragmentation. That is one. Then, asexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction is by zoospores. Okay. So, zoospores are, it goes without saying, they are motile. And when they are motile, we know that flagella are present. Now, this is also one characteristic feature in algae. The flagellar number and position is very important in classifying or differentiating algae. For example, in case of green algae, we see that the flagella are 2 to 8 in number and they are equal and apical. So, if the flagella are present, they are 2 to 8 in number. They are equal. What does equal mean? All flagella look similar. Okay, whether it is 2 or 3 or 4 or 8, all flagella will look similar. And apical, in insertion, what is apical? Found at one tip of the cell. Okay, so that is apical insertion of flagella. Is so much clear? Flagella are 2 to 8 in number, equal and apical. Clear? This is flagella position and insertion. Now, next, talking about sexual reproduction.
One minute, please.
Okay, take it. So, next, sexual reproduction, like I already said, it can be isogamous. Example, Eulothrix. Okay, isogamous. Example, Eulothrix. So, this will be non-motile, motile, and Spirogyra will be non-motile. So, example for algae that show isogamous type of sexual reproduction, Eulothrix and Spirogyra. Next is anisogamous. That is one more species, that is Chlamydomonas. That is also one more example. Okay, and then we can have oogamous. Now, the example for this is not given. We studied isogamous, anisogamous, oogamous example in general characteristics of algae. Here, examples are not mentioned in your textbook. So, just know the examples. Okay, so oogamous type of sexual reproduction we see in case of volvox. So, this is already seen. Is this clear? Okay, so this is about sexual reproduction and examples of class Chlorophyceae. We already have seen many examples, so you can write Chlamydomonas is one, Cara, Spirogyra, Eulothrix, Volvox, all these are examples of class Chlorophyceae. Okay, so any 3 to 4 you might have to remember. Clear? This is about class Chlorophyceae. Can we move to the next topic? Phaeophyceae. Yeah. So next is class Phaeophyceae, commonly called brown algae. Okay, class Phaeophyceae, commonly called brown algae. Now, the members of Phaeophyceae are generally found in marine habitats. They're mostly marine to brackish water. What is brackish water?
Brown colored muddy water.
But it's kind of partially salty. Okay, so marine and partially salty water. So which means it's a mix of both fresh water and marine. Okay, so like that. So marine and brackish water forms, and we see that only they exist as branched filamentous forms. So this is one major difference. So in case of Chlorophyceae, we saw that there is unicellular and then colonial forms, right, motile and non-motile, whereas in this case none of that is found. Okay, so class Phaeophyceae does not have simple unicellular members, it only exists as branched filamentous forms. Okay, so they can exist either as simple branched filaments, as in case of Ectocarpus. Example, Ectocarpus is one. It's a simple branched filament. Or Parenchymatous foliose forms, which means it has kind of a leaf-like structures, foliose, leaf-like. Okay, parenchymatous foliose forms, which means actual tissue level of organization you see. That is seen in case of laminaria. Then number 3, profusely branched forms. Profusely branched forms like kelps. Kelps is the common name for seaweeds, which means large algae that will extend for several feet. Okay, so this is about the general thallus organization of algae. So it could either be simple branched filaments like Ectocarpus or parenchymatous foliose forms like laminaria, or profusely branched forms like kelps or seaweeds. And then talking about pigments. Now in this case, the pigments are chlorophyll A and chlorophyll C. Chlorophyll A and chlorophyll C. And as the name indicates, it is brown in color, which means there is predominance of a specific pigment called fucoxanthin. Okay, So carotenoids and xanthophylls are present, but there is pigment, there is the predominance of a specific pigment called fucoxanthin, which gives it the characteristic brown color. But it's not just brown, it will produce, based on the concentration of fucoxanthin that is present, we can have a wide range of colors, ranging from brown to different shades of olive green. Okay, so it is still chlorophyll only. Just because we call it brown algae doesn't mean it's a different pigment. It is just that chlorophyll A and C are present, and along with that a specific pigment called fucoxanthin is present. And when it is present in different concentrations, we see that different color shades are produced, which is from brown to various shades of olive green. Is this clear? Clear? This is about pigments. And then talking about the food storage material, reserve food material or storage food material, it is complex carbohydrates. Complex carbohydrates like laminarin and mannitol. Remember this. The storage food material differs with each class of algae. The storage food material is called laminarin and mannitol. Okay, so this is complex carbohydrates which exist as reserve food materials for brown algae. And then cellular structure, the cell has a cellulosic cell wall. So cell wall is cellulosic, no doubt in that. But along with this, there is a gelatinous coating of a material called algin. Okay, cellulosic cell wall that is covered on the exterior by means of a gelatinous coating of a material called algin. Okay, so this algin is a commercially useful material which we will see in the economic importance of algae. Okay, so within the cell there will be, protoplast and nucleus and a large vacuole. I'm not going into all of that. It's just like any plant cell. Okay, and then the plant body is differentiated into three parts. Number one is the hold fast. Hold fast is the basal root like structure. Basal root like structure. Then there is the stipe. Tiny stalk like structure. And then the frond. This is the expanded leaf like photosynthetic organ. Okay, so listen, the plant body is differentiated like this. There is a basal, hold fast, a small stipe, and a frond. Okay, let me just okay, it looks something like this. 'This is the hold fast, stipe, and frond. Now, with the help of the hold fast, the algae will be attached to the substratum, and there is a tiny stipe or stalk-like structure from which the leaf-like organ, which is the photosynthetic organ, arises. Okay, so this is about body organization of Phaeophyce. Is this clear? All right. Now, next we'll talk about reproduction. Again, vegetative reproduction is by fragmentation. I'm not going into that again. Asexual reproduction is by means of biflagellate zoospores. So again, the asexual method or asexual method of reproduction is by asexual spores called zoospores, and like I said, zoospores are flagellate or motile, and the zoospores here are biflagellate zoospores. And this is one major thing that you have to remember. The spores are pear shaped. Okay, it's called pyriform or pear shaped gametes or spores. Okay, pyriform, pear shaped gametes or spores, and it has flagella that are 2 in number, unequal, and laterally attached. What does that mean? See, this is the difference from the spores and gametes of Chlorophyce to Phaeophyce. So the zoospores are number 1 biflagellate, not 2 to 8, only 2 flagella are present. The spores are pyriform or pear shaped. Okay, pear shaped spores, and the flagella are 2 in number, unequal and laterally attached. What does unequal mean? They do not look similar. Now, for example, in case of Chlorophyce, I said flagella are 2 to 8 equal and apical, which means all flagella look similar. But in this case, they are unequal and laterally attached. What is laterally? One on this side and the other on the other side, or both could be present on one single side. Okay, so this is laterally attached flagella, and they are unequal, meaning one flagellum is smooth while the other is tinsel shaped, we call it. Okay, this is called smooth or whiplash type flagellum, and this is the tinsel type flagellum. Okay, smooth or whiplash type, the other one is the tinsel type. Now, because there are two different types of flagella present, we call it unequal, and then they are laterally attached. Apical would be from here, no, this is lateral on either sides or from the same side. Okay, so flagella are two, unequal and laterally attached. Is this clear? Is clear? Is it clear so much?
Teacher, does it have a vegetative form of reproduction?
Fragmentation.
Okay.
Fragmentation. Okay, so this type of unequal type flagellum, we call it isocont condition. I'm sorry, not isocont, heterocont. When it is equal, we call it isocont. This is called heterocont. Okay, heterocont condition where two different types of flagella are formed. Is this clear? Yeah. All right. Next, we'll move on to sexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction, nothing major change. Again, it is isogamous, anisogamous, and oogamous. Okay. And in this case, we usually see the fusion of gametes taking place either within water or within oogonia. Okay. Takes place in water or within the oogonium. Oogonium is the female sex organ or female reproductive organ. Okay, female reproductive organ inside which fusion of gametes will take place, specifically in oogamous species. Okay, so sexual reproduction can be isogamous, anisogamous, or oogamous, and the fusion of gametes takes place either in water. So in case of isogamous and anisogamous sexual reproduction, fusion of gametes will take place in water. Okay, whereas fusion taking place within the oogonium is generally within the oogamous species. Is this clear? Then the gametes again are pyriform and bear two laterally attached flagella that are unequal. So be it the zoospore or the gamete, they are all the same. Okay, the gametes or the zoospores will be pear shaped pyriform and they bear two laterally attached flagella that are unequal. Is this clear? This is about the morphology of the gametes and the spores. Now talking about the examples of phaeophyce. Remember this particular acronym F L E D S, FLEDS. Okay, F for fucus, L is for laminaria, E is for ectocarpus, D is for dictyota, and S is for sargassum. Okay, these are the examples. Remember, FLEDS, fucus, laminaria, ectocarpus, dictyota, sargassum. These are the examples of algae that belong to class Phaeophyce, commonly called brown algae. Is this clear? Is so much clear? So I hope you remember all the points. Okay, so it is a slightly evolved form of algae where you do not see unicellular and colonial forms. Straightly we see filamentous forms only. Then going to the next topic, class Rhodophyceae, commonly called red algae, Rhodophyceae or red algae. Now they are commonly called so because of the characteristic red color that it produces where it is present, because it has the predominance of the red pigment which is R phycoerythrin. Okay, so the characteristic red color pigment is because of the predominance of the pigment, which is R phycoerythrin. Along with this, other photosynthetic pigments are also found. We will see what that is. Okay, so it has chlorophyll A and chlorophyll D. Along with that, it has R phycoerythrin. Okay, hence the characteristic red color. And then over here, red algae mainly occur in warmer regions of the ocean. Okay, warmer regions of the ocean, which means there is still high temperature, okay, as compared to the temperature at the bottom of the ocean. So usually found predominantly in warmer regions of the ocean, although some may be found at great depths. Where little light penetrates. So I hope you are able to visualize how an ocean will be divided into different depth regions, right? So the surface of the ocean will be quite warm because it is constantly exposed to sunlight, and probably 50 to 75 meters down, what happens, light will penetrate, no, up to 100 to 200 meters light will penetrate, and as long as light penetrates, the water in that region will be both warm and well illuminated, right? There will still be visibility. So what happens, algae and other plants will be found predominantly in such regions. But as we move down towards the ocean, light does not penetrate, no, which means temperature also comes down. So it's not a very favorable environment for algal growth, but still certain red algae can exist at great depths where almost no light penetrates. Okay, so this is about habitat. Then the thallus is multicellular. Multicellular thallus with a complex body organization. Okay, so what happens is, in this case we do not see your again unicellular and colonial and motile or simple branched also. It is extensively branched form with a multicellular thallus and complex body organization. And then storage food material. It's called Floridian starch. Okay, the storage food material is called Floridian starch, and this is similar to glycogen and amylopectin in structure. Okay, so listen, now your glycogen is a polymer of what monomer? Cellulose, you know, right? Cellulose is a polymer of glucose. Same way, your glycogen is also a polymer of glucose only, except there are small structural differences. By the branching, all of that, we will see differences. So the storage food material in case of class Rhodophyceae is Floridian starch, which is similar in structure to glycogen and amylopectin. Similar in structure to amylopectin and glycogen. So this is about the storage food material. And then next we'll talk about reproduction. Again, reproduction vegetatively, it is by fragmentation. Okay, I'm not writing it again. Vegetative reproduction, fragmentation. Asexual reproduction is by spores. Asexual spores. And one interesting thing to note here is that there are no absolutely no motile structures here. So it is always non-motile, be it the spores or the gametes. They're entirely non-motile. Okay, so absolutely no motile structures. All of them are non-motile. And talking about sexual reproduction also, sexual reproduction is entirely oogamous, and again no motile structures, and it is accompanied by complex post fertilization changes. Okay, so this is about sexual reproduction. It is oogamous and accompanied by complex post fertilization changes, meaning after fertilization there is a separate plant body kind of thing formed, that is formed as a result of fertilization. Okay, so complex post fertilization changes, details are not required at this time. Just understand that a special body or a sporophyte kind of structure is formed in algae specifically for production of spores. So that is complex post fertilization change. Now this is actually slightly bridging the gap between algae and the next group of plants that we will study, which is bryophytes. Okay, so this is the complexity in the life cycle that we are talking about. Then examples, remember 4, P, P, G and G. Okay, Porphyra, Polysiphonia, then Gracilaria and Gelidium. Okay, examples P, P, G, G. Okay, Porphyra, Polysiphonia, Gracilaria and Gelidium. These are examples of class Rhodophyceae. Is this clear? Do you have any questions so far? Clear? So with this we complete the 3 classes of algae. Okay, so one is Chlorophyceae, the other one is Phaeophyceae, and the last one is Rhodophyceae. Okay, clear? Yes, green algae, brown algae and red algae. Now finally what is left is talking about economic importance of algae. Okay, so talking about the economic importance of algae, they are quite important. They carry out about 50% of the total carbon dioxide fixation on earth. Okay, being photosynthetic, because algae are photosynthetic, they carry out around 50% of the total carbon dioxide fixation, carbon dioxide being fixed and converted into other materials. So that work, more than 50% of it is being done by algae. And then it increases the level of dissolved oxygen in its immediate environment. Okay, so because of carbon dioxide fixation, oxygen is being released by photosynthesis, right? So it increases the level of oxygen, the level of dissolved oxygen in its immediate environment. And algae happen to be primary producers, right? They are the major producers of any aquatic ecosystem. So they are primary producers that form the basis of food chain. In aquatic ecosystems. So being photosynthetic, they are primary producers. Now not many higher plants we find that grow in water, so the incidence of hydrophytes that we see is quite less, but what is found more is actually algae. Now because algae can be unicellular, they can occupy a large space or a lot of space within the water body, correct, which means they are the major producers, chief producers of any aquatic ecosystem, which means they form the basis of the food chain. Okay, this is in general about the ecological importance, we can say. So it plays a great role in ecosystems. And then now talking specifically about economic importance, species of laminaria and sargassum are used as food. Some species of laminaria and sargassum, both belonging to class Phaeophyceae. So these are edible algae. So there are around 70 species of algae that are edible. We have 70 species of edible algae, of which laminaria and sargassum are one. Okay, and we also have porphyra species that is used as food. Okay, porphyra is also used as food. Is this clear? So this is about edible algae, close to 70 species. You might have heard of something called a seaweed called nori. Okay, all of that is algae. Okay, edible algae. Then talking about hydrocolloids that are produced. Hydrocolloids are produced by the cell wall of algae, where it is a substance with water holding capacity. So the special feature is that it is capable of holding many times of water. It's in its own volume. Okay, so it's a substance with high water holding capacity, and we have two such hydrocolloids that are extracted from algae. One is algin, that is from brown algae. Algin is a hydrocolloid that is obtained from Phaeophyceae members. The other one is carrageen, which is extracted from red algae, rhodophyceae. So remember it like this: carrageen has R for red algae. Okay, carrageen is a hydrocolloid that is extracted from red algae, and algin is a hydrocolloid that is extracted from brown algae. Is this clear? So these are water holding substances or hydrocolloids. Then is extraction of substance called agar agar. Have you heard of this? Agar agar? Yeah. What is this? It is a substance that is used to grow microbes and also in tissue culture experiments. Okay, so agar agar is a medium for microbial growth, and it is also used in jam and jelly making, because it is used as a thickening agent. Okay, so agar agar is a material that is used to grow microbes and used in jam and jelly making as a thickening agent. Now where is this agar obtained from? From two red algae, which is Gracilaria, and the other one is Gelidium. These two are what give the agar agar. Okay, clear? Then finally, talking about this one specific algae called chlorella. Chlorella, very rich in proteins. Okay, rich in proteins and used as food supplement by astronauts. Now, you know that when astronauts travel to space, they cannot carry, food like us, no? They cannot be cooking food there, they cannot take ready-made food there. Eating food over there is quite a difficult process. So, what happens is they will eat normal food, but along with that, what happens, because they are eating dehydrated food, they will be seriously undernourished or malnourished. So to make up for that loss of nutrients, what they do is they take protein supplements like this in the form of chlorella and spirulina, which are rich in proteins. Okay, so that the body gets what it requires. Is this clear? So this is about economic importance of algae. So we talked first about the ecological importance, how it will perform photosynthesis, increase dissolved oxygen level and fix carbon dioxide, right? That is one. Then it is the primary producer. Then we talked about edible species of algae, laminaria, sargassum and porphyra. And then we talked about hydrocolloids like algin and carrageen. Then is agar agar, used as thickening agent. And finally chlorella, that is used in space traveling, used as a protein supplement. Is this clear? This is about algae. So we talked about chlorophyceae, phaeophyceae and rhodophyceae and economic importance. So next we will move on to the next group of plants, which is bryophytes. Bryophytes, commonly called mosses. Okay, bryophytes are commonly called mosses. Now these mosses generally exist in terrestrial environment. Okay, so mosses are generally terrestrial. Mosses, otherwise called liverworts. Okay, these are common names of bryophytes. These are terrestrial plants growing in moist shaded regions. So they grow in moist shaded regions because they still require water for fertilization. Okay, hence they're called amphibians of plant kingdom. They're called amphibians of the plant kingdom, which means they live in a terrestrial environment but require water for fertilization. So live in a terrestrial environment but still require water for fertilization, hence we call them amphibians of plant kingdom. Okay, so this is the next step in the evolution of plants, where algae being predominantly aquatic, the next group of plants has become terrestrial, but it's still dependent on water for fertilization. Okay, making them amphibians of plant kingdom, and they occur in damp, humid regions, and they occur as dense mats on compound walls and on soil and all that. So usually during rainy season you will see abundance of mosses. Is this clear? So this is about where we find them generally. Then the thallus, again, it is still thalloid, not properly divided. Thallus not differentiated into true roots, stem and leaves, and the thallus may be prostrate. It is prostrate, creeping on the substratum, or it could be erect. Okay, so the thallus may be prostrate or erect, and it is not differentiated into true root, stem and leaves. So again, when we say true root, stem and leaf, we mean that there is no vasculature, no xylem and phloem. Okay, so no vasculature, and the thallus may be prostrate or erect. And the main plant body, the thallus, is a haploid gametophyte. So this thallus that we are talking about, prostrate or erect plant body which is not differentiated, so the plant body is a or gametophyte which is haploid. Now can you remember what gametophyte is? We talked about alternation of generation, no? Yeah, what is gametophyte? It is a plant body that produces gametes. Plant body that produces gametes. Is this clear? So the thallus is a haploid gametophyte which produces gametes. Now for the production of gametes, the gametophyte has specific male and female reproductive organs. Okay, now can I erase this? So the gametophyte is going to produce specific male reproductive organ called antheridium. The antheridium is a multicellular structure. Okay, so the sex organs, or reproductive organs in bryophytes, are small but multicellular. Multicellular reproductive organs, where the male reproductive organ is called the antheridium, which looks something like this. It's a tennis bat shaped structure which has a jacket like this. Okay, an external layer of cells. And inside this layer, what it has is a series of cells that look like this. So this is what I said, it's a tennis bat shaped structure. Okay, inside this we have numerous cells. Each of these are called antheridial initials. Okay, they're called antheridial initials. Each cell is capable of developing into an antheridium. Okay, so antheridium is the male reproductive organ which will produce numerous cells called antheridial initials. Now these antheridial initials will mature to form something called an antherozoid. Antherozoid, which is the male gamete. So the male gamete in case of bryophyte is called the antherozoid, and it happens to be biflagellate. So this biflagellate anthrozoid will look something like this. It's kind of a coiled structure which has two flagella over here. Okay, so this is the biflagellate anthrozoid, which means because it has flagella, it is capable of swimming through water, which is why it requires water for fertilization. So it cannot exist under dry conditions. Okay, it requires water for fertilization. So is this clear? The male reproductive organ is called antheridium. The antheridium has antheridial initials which will mature into a biflagellate anthrozoid, which is the male gamete, and it looks like this. Clear? Now, let's talk about the female reproductive organ called archegonium. Now, this archegonium is a flask shaped structure like this. Okay, this is the archegonium, where at the base of this pot like structure you will find the egg cell. So the egg cell is over here. These are additional cells, venter cells and neck cells. Okay, so these are additional cells that help in fertilization. So nothing significant about it. Okay, so after these cells are degenerated, the bottommost cell is the egg cell. Okay, female gamete. Now again, in this case, sexual reproduction is entirely oogamous. Is this clear? Sexual reproduction is always oogamous. There is no other isogamy and anisogamy from bryophyte onwards. So only up until algae it was isogamy, anisogamy and oogamy. From here on forth, it is entirely oogamous, where the mate is motile and the female gamete is non-motile. Okay, so now the process of fertilization happens where during rainy season enough amount of water should be available. So that is when the bryophytes will start flourishing. So what happens when the egg cell is mature? The additional cells that are present above the egg cell will degenerate and they will form sort of a mucilaginous mass over here. Okay, so they form a jelly like mass where, let's say this is the biflagellate anthrozoid. This will swim through water and it will reach the egg cell and fertilize this. Okay, so this is haploid gamete, egg cell, again haploid gamete. Now once fertilization happens, what will it turn into? It will turn into a diploid zygote. Do you get my point? Once the haploid male gamete and the haploid female gamete fuse by fertilization, it transforms itself into a diploid zygote. Now this zygote is the initial cell or the first cell of the sporophytic generation. Initial cell of the sporophytic generation. So what it does is, this zygote, instead of undergoing meiosis, it starts dividing over and over, which means it undergoes mitosis. Okay, the zygote will undergo continuous mitosis and it will transform the structure into the sporophyte. So the zygote by mitosis transforms into the sporophytic generation. So the sporophyte is the plant body that produces spores. Okay, so the sporophyte is a diploid structure. Understand? Okay, the sporophyte, because the zygote is diploid, obviously the sporophyte is also going to be a diploid structure and it is the plant body that produces spores. but these spores are haploid. Spores are haploid. Okay, so how is it getting produced? The sporophyte will have sporogenous tissue. Within the sporophyte, there is something called sporogenous tissue which is diploid. Now, the sporogenous tissue will undergo meiosis and it will produce many spores that are haploid. Clear? It will produce spores that are haploid, and these spores will germinate. They get released. The spores will get released and they germinate to produce the gametophyte back. Is this clear? Clear? So, from the gametophyte, we have gametes being produced. The gametes will fuse and form the zygote. The zygote produces the sporophyte. The sporophyte will produce sporogenous tissue, which undergoes meiosis to produce spores. So, the spores are haploid. Once the spores get released, they will germinate to produce the gametophyte again. Okay, so this is the life cycle of mosses or life cycle of bryophytes. Is this clear? So, this entire thing is the outline of the life cycle of bryophytes or mosses. Clear? Okay. So, we'll stop here. Next, about the different types of bryophytes, we'll see in the next class. Okay. Thank you, students.